God made sure that we have everything we need right here in His Word, the Bible. And God made sure that Samson's life story got in the Bible because Samson's story contains things that I need to know and apply to my life with God. In Samson, God teaches me that what matters most is not being strong on the outside, but being strong on the inside. Unfortunately, many of us have not learned this lesson. Some of us really want to serve God. Some of us really want to make a difference in Jesus' name. But instead, we're defeated, we're discouraged, we're discontent. And the reason is the Samson Syndrome, meaning that we are not focused on the strength that really matters inside. Samson lived in a time when God's people were being oppressed by these ruthless thugs called the Philistines. God's people needed help, and so God chose Samson, and God gave Samson everything he needed to represent him and do his work in the world, including, in particular, God empowered Samson with superhuman strength. And so Samson took this strength and started the process of setting God's people free. But the problem was that while he was strong on the outside, Samson allowed himself to become weak on the inside. And because of his weakness on the inside, Samson was trapped and neutralized and eventually incapable of doing God's work or representing God in the world. So let's pick up Samson's story in the home of a woman named Delilah. Samson is in Delilah's home because, according to verse 14 of verse 4 of Judges 16, Samson is in love with her. Samson is in love with Delilah, which means that Samson knows for sure that he is also out of God's will. This relationship is displeasing to God because Delilah has no love for God, no love for God's people, even worse. Samson is in bed with Delilah outside of a marriage commitment, which Samson knows is in full opposition to God's plan for his life. Samson knows that being in this relationship with Delilah is wrong. What Samson doesn't know is that Delilah is part of a Philistine plot. Delilah is with him only to find out how to separate Samson from God and God's power, as we read in Judges chapter 16, verse 15. Then Delilah said to Samson, "How can you say, 'I love you,' when you won't confide in me? This is the third time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength." With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. So he told her everything. Samson said, "No razor has ever been used on my head because I have been a Nazarite set apart to God since birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." So let's stop here and just say, what does this mean? Now, Samson says, "No razor has ever been used on my head because I have been a Nazarite since birth." What is a Nazarite? Well, a Nazarite is someone who took God up on what I consider probably the greatest offer that God extended his people before he came in the person of Jesus. About 200 years before Samson was born, God and Moses had a conversation. It's recorded in Numbers chapter 6, where God tells Moses, "Moses, I want you to go to my people and extend to them a special offer on my behalf. Just tell them, if someone wants to dedicate themselves to represent me in the world, have them just tell me. If someone wants to dedicate themselves to doing my work in this world, have them just tell me. And if they tell me this is their desire, I will fill them with my power to represent me and do my work in this world. And then God said, Moses, this is how I want you to tell me that this is their desire. Number one, that person should refuse to eat grapes or drink grape juice or wine. And two, have that person refuse to cut their hair. Moses, tell my people that refusing grapes and refusing haircuts this is an outward sign of that person's inward desire to be set apart for me and my work. And that's what the Hebrew word Nazarite means. Nazarite means one who is set apart. And in the Bible, we're introduced to three Nazarites. In the Old Testament, there's first Samson and Samuel. And then in the New Testament, there's John the Baptist. Anyway, from birth, Samson never tasted a grape or got a haircut. And Samson grew up knowing that these two commitments set him apart for God and for God's work. Samson knew that the secret of his super strength was not his hair. It was this internal commitment that he had made to God. And if you're a Christ follower, I hope that you're making the direct connection between this great deal offered to Samson and the deal that God offers me and you and every other follower of Jesus. Because when I receive forgiveness through my faith in Jesus and what he does on the cross for me, and I make my internal commitment to follow Jesus and represent him and do his work in the world, Jesus promises to fill me with his super strength of his indwelling spirit. Jesus promises this to me and you in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, where Jesus says, with my indwelling spirit in you, you will have power to be my witnesses and to have worldwide impact in my name. That's the deal that Jesus makes with us. When I make a commitment to follow Jesus, Jesus commits to empower me to represent him in this world. Jesus empowers me to do his work in this world and may my life make a difference in this world. In Jesus, I am strengthened with the very same Spirit of God that super strengthened Samson, unless I fall into the same syndrome that Samson did. Reading on. Delilah sent word to the rulers of the Philistines. Samson has told me everything. So the rulers of the Philistines returned with silver in their hands to pay Delilah. Having put Samson to sleep on her lap, she called a man to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him. And Samson's strength left him. Then Delilah called out, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And he woke up from his sleep and thought, I will go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him grinding in the prison. So what is the Samson Syndrome? The Samson Syndrome is letting my God-given strengths on the outside become useless to God's purpose in my life because of my weakness against temptation on the inside. That's the Samson Syndrome. And I bet you, just like me, you want your life to count for God. So let's study Samson's life to try to understand the cause of the Samson Syndrome and the cure for the Samson Syndrome. Let's begin with the cause. The cause of the Samson Syndrome is failing to fight temptation. Samson was this big old brawler on the outside, but he did not exercise the muscles for the interior fight that we must all face with temptation on the inside. Everyone faces temptation, but we do not all face the same temptations, right? The place where I am most tempted may not tempt you at all. When I analyze myself, The area that I probably experience the most temptation is in an area I would regard insecurity issues, where through a fear of failure, I shrink back from God's call for me in my life to do His work. I shrink back out of the fear of doing something wrong or saying something wrong. My wife Jen and I were on a plane trip not too long ago, and I was sitting on the aisle across from a mom who was absolutely overwhelmed. She had 3 children under 6. Her arms were filled with 2 children, and then she had this 3rd oldest child who was a screamer. Let me describe. This oldest child was a screamer in that this kid was not in pain in any way, but every 10 minutes or so, this kid would let out a blood-freezing scream that would go on for minutes, not because this child was in any kind of distress, but just out of kind of disobedience and disrespect to his mother who told him not to do this, and had this diabolical joy in just this vocal talent that would cause all the people on the plane to just cringe, and he loved seeing this, and it would just smile. And anyway, this little child, I don't know his name, Lucifer comes to mind, but I think the little Lucifer could not be, kind of restrained at all because his mom had her arms just full with other kids. And so I saw this mom totally overwhelmed, and I started hearing this voice. It was the voice of God. God saying, get involved. Offer some help. This mom is just overwhelmed. She just would love an expression of kindness and support. Offer to help. That was God's voice. I knew that was God's voice. But you know what? There was another voice in my head as well. And this is the voice of my insecurity, tempting me to shrink back from getting involved in God's call at all because of my fear of failure. This voice was saying things like, don't say anything. Whatever you say is probably going to insult her. Don't do anything. You're not going to make things better. You're only going to make things worse. And so I had this battle going on. I wanted to fight in this Samson kind of syndrome kind of situation. I wanted to fight, so I'm going back and forth. And after a few moments of indecision, made my decision. Leaned over the aisle to this woman, and I said, my wife and I, we had 2 little kids at the same time. We know exactly what it's like to have, yourself just overwhelmed and your arms full in a flight like this. I understand what a struggle it is and how stressful it is. And I just want you to know, if there's anything that my wife could do to, I am sure she would be. Now, I consider that a victory. Apparently you don't. But I don't know if it was a victory or not against temptation. What I do know is I know my temptation. And my top temptation is this kind of insecurity, this voice of insecurity that makes me want to shrink into a place where I'm not being available to God and God's work. That's my temptation, but it's not Paulo's. Paulo, my friend, he says, insecurity is never my temptation. It's, my weakness area is my temper. If I was on that flight, Paulo says, oh man, I would have been flying in a rage because, I get so angry in any situation where I feel disrespected. My patience is so bad that it keeps me from representing Jesus in this world. But then my friend Crystal says, well, that's not my temptation. No, my temptation is this greed for approval. That's why I'm greedy for titles and degrees and expensive purchases that try to scream to the world that I'm worthy of love. But then my friend Lauren says, it's not insecurity, it's not anger, it's not greed that keeps me from making a difference with God. I'm just like Samson. My temptation is escaping my inner pain through medicating, through alcohol and media and physical relationships. Now, the fact that Paulo and Crystal and Lawrence and I all have different temptation areas should be leading yourself to ask the question about you. and your customized weakness. You should do the math saying this: to make a difference in this world, I need Jesus' power. In order to have Jesus' power, I must have the strength to resist temptation. In order to have the strength to resist temptation, I need to know my deepest weakness. And in order to know my deepest weakness, I need to be aware of my deepest wounds. That's uncomfortable math, but that is exactly the equation that God reveals in Samson's story. Samson's deepest weakness is connected, the result of his deepest wound. And it's the same thing for you. It's the same thing for me. The same as it was for Samson. Before Delilah came on the scene, we're told in Judges 14 and 15, we're told how Samson falls in love with this woman from the town of Timnah, deeply in love. And then we're told how Samson is engaged to this woman in marriage. And then we're told how through a series of deep betrayals and bitter disappointments, this engagement ends up being broken, and Samson's closest friend ends up marrying this woman, leaving Samson with these feelings of loneliness and rejection, leaving Samson with this aching, unmet desire for intimacy that he now tries to manipulate and fulfill in Delilah his way and in his own time. Now notice how temptation is connected to unmet desire. Samson's temptation is connected to his unmet desire for intimacy. Paulo's temptation is connected to his unmet desire for respect. Crystal's temptation is connected to her unmet desire for love and approval. Lawrence's temptation is connected to his unmet desire to escape from his inner pain. What about you? The only way you can guard against the Samson Syndrome is to do the hard work of peeling back the layers that identify your unhealed wounds that end up feeding your unmet desires, which become your weak areas for temptation. A process that God's Word puts a whole lot better than I just have in and through the Apostle James, who says, each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. That's a great summary, isn't it? A great summary of the Samson Syndrome process. But what is the cure? What is the cure? What am I supposed to do with these unmet desires? Well, Samson demonstrates what we're not to do. Samson demonstrates the worst thing I can do with my unmet desires is to put a death grip on them and try to fulfill those desires in my way and my time, no matter how much it may be disobedient to God. Samson had a death grip on his unmet need due to loneliness and rejection. Samson had a death grip on Delilah, who was his foolish attempt to try to fulfill those desires himself and in his own way and in his own time. In Africa, I had a firsthand view into how they trap monkeys in Asia and Africa. You've probably seen it too. It's called the monkey trap. And it starts with a jug. And the jug has this large container area and then a narrow neck and a narrow opening. The idea is you put this jug buried in the ground or you attach it to something unmovable. And then in the bottom of the jug, you put something that a monkey would desire. You put a big banana or a big apple or high-yield bonds. I don't know what monkeys want these days. But you put something that a monkey would want in the bottom of the jug, and then you walk away. And eventually, the monkey comes, and the monkey puts their hand into the jug, and in the process of grasping the thing that the monkey desires, the fist does not fit through the narrow opening. And so now the monkey is trapped. Why? Because a monkey will never let go of the thing that they desire. And so those monkeys, they'll be there for hours upon hours upon hours because they will not let go of what they desire. That's how you capture a monkey. But that's also how many of us get captured as well. Samson gripped his unmet desire for intimacy. He had a death grip on that. He would not let go until it became a trap. You know, the monkey jar, it works on a good banana, right? It doesn't work with rotten fruit. And so what I'm trying to say is that intimacy, Samson's desire for intimacy is a good desire. It's a good desire, but see, unfortunately, these good desires that we grasp onto to fulfill in our way, in our time, they become obsessions that trap us. It's a good desire to get married. It's a good desire to want to get pregnant. It's a good desire to want a house. It's a good desire to want to succeed materially. It's a good desire to want to be popular, to want to please people. But these good desires, when they become obsessive goals that we cannot let go of, lead us right into the bronze shackles of captivity. Today, God warns me, God warns you about the monkey trap. In his love, God tells you to let go of your unmet desires. In his love, God calls you to give your unmet desires to him. In his love, God calls you to find your desires fulfilled in a relationship with him. That's the cure for the Samson Syndrome. The cure for the Samson Syndrome is turning to God. The cause of the Samson Syndrome is trying to meet my unmet desires on the outside by failing to fight temptation on the inside. The cure for the Samson Syndrome is turning to God. The cure is letting go of my unmet desires and letting God meet those desires in a relationship with him. And guess who experienced the cure for the Samson Syndrome? Samson did. Samson's story has quite an ending. The Philistines brought Samson up from his prison cell to make sport of him. A crowd of thousands gathered in a pagan temple in order to mock God and laugh at God's servant, who's now blind and bald. And they chained Samson between two mighty pillars supporting this pagan temple of mockery. And there, Samson whispered a prayer. Whispered a simple prayer. It's a brief prayer. Because, you know, in order to turn back to God, it's just a few words from the heart. It's a brief prayer. For Samson, it's a coming home to God prayer. It's a prayer very similar to the expression of the prodigal who comes back to his father after wandering and following destructive desires, comes back to the father who embraces him back home. Samson prayed, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me once more." Remember those words. Please, God, strengthen me once more. Make them your prayer today. Please, God, strengthen me once more. Apparently, in prison, Samson turned to God. In prison, Samson let God heal his unhealed wounds. Samson let go of his selfish, unmet desire and turned home into a relationship with God. We don't know everything that God heard from Samson, but we do know what God did in response. God showered full forgiveness on Samson by restoring his full strength. So Samson had the power to bring down those pagan temple pillars in a way that brought victory to God's people and glory to God. And Samson did it all with a haircut. Why? Because God's power was never in his hair on the outside. His strength, just like your strength as a follower of Jesus, comes from this internal commitment in a relationship with Jesus. And just like God restored strength to Samson, Jesus wants to restore power in your heart today. Just like God gave full forgiveness and a fresh start to Samson, Jesus invites you to receive his cure for the Samson Syndrome in your life. Jesus says, "Turn to me." Because with Jesus, there is full forgiveness for any failure, for any failing. Because with Jesus, there is strength over every destructive desire. Maybe you're here and you look strong on the outside, but it is a mask. And behind the mask, you know that you are weak inside. Behind the mask, Jesus knows you're weak inside. You're following your destructive desires. You're not following Jesus. You're following your unmet desires, and instead you're falling right into a Delilah's trap. You're not fighting your temper or jealousy or bitterness that comes from your refusal to forgive people who hurt you. You're not fighting the worry prison and fear and the people-pleasing that has you shackled. You're not fighting your lust and your alcoholism or your shopaholism or your addiction to more and more money and more possessions. Instead of following God's word and God's good plan for your life, you're following temptations right to a monkey trap. So like Samson, you're shackled. You want to serve God, but you don't have the power really to do so. You want to make a difference, but you have not the strength inside. Right now, Jesus says to you, release your grip on those destructive desires and turn to me. Turn to me and I'll welcome you home with celebration. Turn to me and I'll give you a fresh infilling of my spirit. Turn to me and I'll give you the power to represent me in this world. Turn to me, I'll give you the power to make a difference with your life. Turn to me and I will make you strong inside, because Jesus is here right now and he's offering to you, he's extending to you that same offer that he gave to the Nazarites, like Samson long ago, where Jesus says, if you want to dedicate your life to representing me in this world, just tell me. If you want to dedicate your life to making a difference in this world through me, just tell me. If you commit yourself internally to me, then you will be my witness, because I will fill you with the power of my Spirit. I will make you strong inside. So turn to Jesus right now and accept his offer. Drop your unmet desires in the monkey jar and instead find the fulfillment of your wildest dreams in a relationship with Jesus. Turn away from the voice of temptation and instead turn to Jesus with that simple homecoming prayer of Samson. Please, Jesus, strengthen me once more. Please, Jesus, strengthen me once more.
Thank you for watching Black Rock Church's Sunday service. We're so glad you found us, and we hope this message made you feel more connected to God. In talking about connection, we find that it's super important for people to be connected to others and to community in order to grow in their faith. So if you're in the area, we invite you to join us to worship in a service. You can find out about our times and locations right here on this webpage. We'd also love to help you connect in a group and find people who can walk alongside you as you continue deepening your understanding and faith. And after you get to know us, you might even like to use your gifts to serve on a team. We believe God gave each of us unique gifts that we can use to serve those around us. One body with many different parts. If you're not able to be here in person, don't worry. We have a great online community and many ways for you to join in virtually and talk to us throughout the week. You can also stay in touch on our website, YouTube channel, Facebook, and Instagram. By visiting our website, you can also easily give your offering one time as an online gift or a reoccurring gift. Just click Give at the top. The Bible tells us that tithing is an important part of our relationship with Jesus, and we want to continue to trust God with our lives and our finances. Well, we are so glad you made the choice to get to know us and view one of our services. We hope that you join us next week. Thanks so much for watching.